So my name's James. I'm one of the coaches with Chorlton Runners, and I've been with the club about 6 years. I started doing my marathons about 2009, so I've done about 35 or so, and across multiple different. So I've done loads of hilly ones as well as flat and off-road, etc. So plenty I hope I can bring to you on that. I'm going to introduce lovely people to my sides.
I'm Val Brennan. I'm afraid I won't recognise many of you unless you do hill reps or Tuesday reps or cross country. But it's many years since I did my marathons, and I've only done 3. I stopped when I got the magical sub 3 in 1985, before many of you were born, probably. I can still I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can still remember, I won't say the pain, but the hard work that goes in.
I'm Stuart Holliday. I've been with Chorlton Runners 12 years, and I have done something like 6 or 7 marathons myself. And these days I don't run marathons, but I am a sports psychologist who works in endurance sport for the GB Olympic swimming team. That's the kit. And I have written the book, The Psychology of Running, with Dr. Noel Brick. And I'm here to talk about how you can use your mind to help you power along everything that these guys do in training physically, get the mental and the physical together, and you're onto a winner.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I suppose, the marathon itself, how we train for it, different types of training. And I suppose I'll try and talk a little bit about how you train for a marathon if you're an absolute novice or you're a 5-hour, versus actually how do we then build that if we're a 4-hour, sub 3, whatever it might be. So I'll try and give a bit of a spectrum across the piece. I'm then also going to talk a little bit about fueling, nutrition, gels, all that kind of stuff. And I will give over a few hints in terms of some of the strength work that you might want to incorporate. I'm specifically going to talk strength work as if you're going to do it at home. If you go to a gym, fantastic. But I will talk predominantly about, are there 5 or 6 key exercises to do when you get home? There are loads of different ways of being able to go out and marathon train. There's a guy called High Higdon. High Higdon is very much about don't do anything hard. He is just about go out, do mileage, do volume, and hopefully you've done enough volume so that it makes sure that on race day, your legs have got enough muscular endurance in them to go out and do the distance. A more traditional approach is one where we have a reasonable amount of fairly easy running in it. We then have our long runs, and our long run I'll talk about in a moment, because they will differ depending on whether you are 5-hour or first time, versus if you want to go and do sub 3, they will look quite different. And then there probably will be one other harder session in there each week on top, be that a tempo run, threshold, etc. The biggest thing we want to train our bodies to be able to do is to deal with fatigue. So that's why we do lots of miles if we can, and we introduce the long runs to be able to get to that point. When we think about where our heart rate is, we typically see a model that has 5 heart rate zones. Zone 1 here, we contort the whole way. Really easy. It might be a warm-up for a race, but generally speaking, it's putting us under no pressure whatsoever running there. We come to zone 2, we're probably kind of with our heart rate in our 130s, perhaps low 140s. It should still be very conversational. And at this point, we should be at a point where our body is using fat as its primary source for fueling our runs. We will be using some glucose down in our muscles, but we want to train our body to be using fat. We then start to come here. Zone 3 within the running world is known as the grey zone. That grey zone is actually, I think, quite enjoyable. It's where you get your tempo runs and that kind of thing. But you are, by this point, starting to use a much bigger amount of glucose within your runs alongside fat stores. I guarantee you, all of you will be running somewhere in this zone on race day. It is really important to make sure that some of your runs are done here. We then have the fast stuff. So here we're talking about when we start to get to the point where our body is creating more lactate, or the rate at which it can clear lactate, we start to create more than we can clear. That's the point at which, if you start to sit in there for too long, potentially you will end up getting cramp in your calves, but you are also absolutely now using your glucose stores in your muscles for your running far more than fat. If you go past that point in the marathon, that is when you will start to hit the wall at mile 18 or mile 20, wherever you get to. And you will find the back 6 miles blooming hard. That's why we do loads of easy miles here. So we train our body to be able to use fat. We do some running here in heart rate zone 3 so that we train the body on how to use that blend of fat and glucose within the race. We do some running here in our threshold. It's why we do long reps at the track session, because we're trying to train the body to be able to hit that line at a faster pace. So if you think, you might at the start of your block be at the point where actually you start to hit lactate threshold at, let's say, 8 minute 30, the ideal, if you want to do really well, is you're starting to train yourself to push that line further. So actually you could hit 8 mile 15. The moment you hit that line, it's really hard to pull it back. Or if you do get your heart rate back under it, you're probably doing so now at a slower pace. For marathoners, the main part is mileage. We need to go out and make sure they've got a decent amount of our running, and it's at a relatively easy pace. If you are somebody who is at kind of the 5-hour marker or what have you, or this is your first one and you're doing it as I just want to get round, in theory, lots of your running should just be there. And the reality actually is probably your race pace will be around that zone 2. It will be very much about probably 3, possibly 4 runs a week. You're doing 1 run on a Tuesday night. You hopefully got 1 on a Thursday and 1 on a Saturday. And just trying to do that if you are simply a first time, let's get round kind of runner. When we start to turn around and say that we want to have a time that we want to go chasing, it's perhaps, sub 4 or a 3:30 or something like that. The first thing is we need to build in more mileage and be running on more days. And we also then need to think about what those runs ending up looking like. Because what we need to train the body to do is not only run for a long time, but you then need to turn around to the body every now and then and say, I also want to train you to be able to run at that pace. If we come back to this and think about here, if you do want to find an opportunity to do a tempo run as an example, think about on your Tuesday night Chorlton Runners run. If you are normally in, let's say, the 9 to 9:30 group or something like that, see if on a couple of weeks you can actually get yourself into the 8:40 to 9 minute mile group. So you're just testing, pushing these lines along. In terms of your long runs, so the most important part as we go through January particularly is just getting the mileage built up. You don't need to put any marathon specificity into the runs yet. When we think about those who are on lower mileage, the ideal is we're trying to get about 70% of your running being down here in zone 2, and possibly about 25 to 30% is anything a bit harder, be that a tempo run, be doing some intervals, or putting some marathon pace into that marathon run. For those who are looking at doing something that bit faster or harder, because your mileage should be that little bit higher, hopefully we get to a point where you are slightly closer. I'm sure people have heard of the 80-20 rule. And in reality, you're trying to get to a point where more like 80% of your mileage is being done down this end, down your zone 2, using fat stores. And then around 20% of your mileage will be up here, doing either tempo, threshold, or putting some marathon pace work into the actual week itself. If you are doing loads, if you sit and think, my goodness, I've done about 40, 50% of my week, which is all up here, you are training your body to be in glycogen deficit. And ultimately, the problem with that is you just can't sustain it for 26 miles to then go up. So don't worry. I mean, the alternative is you'll probably slow down. So either some people can sit there and they'll keep going and they'll just let the heart rate go up and up and up and just maintain pace. There are others who you can see on their graph when you see their Strava, their pace is like that. And then it starts to do that for the last 10K. That's not unnormal. There are things you can do to help that, and that's getting a really good understanding of what your pace should be on race day. But I think if you're going to go out and you're just going to keep sitting going, I need to hit this pace, that's as tricky at times as turning around and saying, how am I feeling? The most important thing is it feeling too hard? And actually, if it's feeling too hard at any point, slow it down for a couple of minutes and just let the heart rate settle and don't worry too much about that pace. Better almost to do that slightly earlier on in the race than we get into mile 20 and go, oh, I'm pooped. That's the most important part. So if you think, so we've got marathon day, the week before the marathon, Sunday before, you will want to do, it kind of depends on what pace you're doing and what have you. I would say anything between kind of 9 and 13 miles, depending on what your rest of your schedule has looked like. The week before that is probably something in between kind of 15 to 17 miles. And the week before that is probably your possibly not the longest, but for those who are getting to 20 miles, will probably be the last 20 miler. Warm, actually. And it's just made me sit and think about Manchester and London last year. So it got really hot.
In both races?
In both races. Nobody trained in those conditions. I know probably 2 people who took the risk of still going out at their original trained pace, and it paid off, and they just about hit their original times. Everybody else I know was a good 10 to 12 minutes off. Everyone. From the very fastest right through to 5 hours. If it gets to conditions like that again, you've got to bear in mind that your heart rate will automatically be working much harder because it's trying to deal with not only pumping oxygen to your muscles, digesting gels, whatever, but it's also having to send blood to the skin to help try to cool you down. So you have got to accept that race, if you train for a 4-hour race, might today be a 4-hour 10 race, and that's absolutely spot on. That is what you need to do. Don't be frightened to take electrolytes within your drinks. You might want to decide, some of you will run with, not camel pack, but a back thing which you've got water in it. If you're going to wear that on race day, make sure you wear it in training so that you know how it feels. It's not going to chafe you or anything like that. Vaseline for your long runs and on race day becomes your go-to product on armpits for gents, certainly down the inner, and ladies, I suppose, the inner thighs. Just make sure that you've got those areas. Even if it's not hot, I would still Vaseline up those areas.
Tape as well.
Yeah. What else have we got?
Salt tablets?
Yeah, so there is, if you go into Holland and Barrett, there is these little packets of like salt tablets. I think there's 10 in a pack. And you can take those without needing to have water or anything. So again, if it's getting warm, then you can end up taking those because that'll just get extra sodium into you. I enjoy a coffee, and I think I've almost got to the point where I enjoy coffee so much that actually my body doesn't get a benefit from it anymore. But coffee does help make us slightly more alert. It does help wake up our muscles and everything else.
It has a performance effect.
It does have a performance effect. So caffeine is important. We talked earlier about gels. So again, if you want to take caffeine gels with you on race day, caffeine gel in particular suddenly makes you suddenly go, oh, actually, yes, I remember what I'm doing again. But you need to test them in your runs because for some people, they will make them need to suddenly then go to the loo. So test it.
And what a lot of people who are experienced runners will take conventional gels, like for the first 20 or so miles of a race. And then when it gets to the business end at 19, 20, 21, that's when they'll hit the caffeine gel. So it'll give you that extra boost. And of course, because you've done all the core work, a nice upright core, the caffeine, you're going to kill the last 6.2 miles.
And then with taper, it is important to make sure, so in your second to last week, you tend to try to keep some intensity in there. You don't necessarily step off the gas in terms of a tempo run or speed work or whatever it is, but you tend to take your mileage down to about 70% or so. In the actual week itself is when you really take both down. So your mileage in the week will depend very much on what your mileage has been previously. It might be that you only do a couple of shortest runs in the lead into the actual marathon itself. If you want to go for a sports massage at all, I would tend to make that the Wednesday if you can. Your sports massage person is going to be kneading your muscles quite hard. Make sure you tell them you've got the marathon on the weekend for a starter so that they don't go too hard on you. Most good massage people will know the difference. But it gives you enough recovery time that the legs then by Sunday are absolutely fine again.
So we've kind of been touching a little bit on what James says, and just the way that he's sort of structured the physical side is textbook, really solid advice. The thing I'm doing in my everyday work is working with elite athletes and trying to then bring it to a wider audience here. And like, what's that best practice look like? Like we just heard about taper week, where you're having proteins at the beginning, carbs in the second part. And very much there's principles which we adhere to. And I just sort of wrote a few down on the way here to read out. So you kind of got to get your head into what is it like to be a marathon runner? Because you've got people here who've never done it before. So how will you know what it's like to run a marathon when you've never run a marathon? That's the point of the long runs, of doing Trimple. You're training your mind as much as your body to be able to cope with that load. So in some ways, always get past thinking about your brain in the way you might do normally and think about it as part of the machinery. And that's the kind of premise that I want you to do from where we are now. And this is great that this is happening at this time, because what will happen if you follow like Race Runner's World or racing magazines or whatever, or online, you'll get all the marathon training bit, and then in the week before London Marathon, there'll be somebody who pipes up, how to train your mind for your best marathon ever. It's like, in my opinion, it's too late, because you need to be training your mind from now, in the first week or two after Christmas, all the way through as you're doing your actual training. And if you do that, your mind will be much more prepared, a bit like the way that you will use nutrition and like fuel yourself properly at the right time every Sunday at 7 o'clock if you're doing a 10:30 run, and having the right kind of food. If you're a few races in, you're probably saying something like, well, I got a 3:45 last time, I want a 3:30, I got this time, that time, I want to go quicker. I want to make over the mistake or the really hard marathon I did last time. And like, the best way I would say to do that is talk to coaches like James and Val, find out what happened in your race, what happened in your training, and find the gaps, but also talk to someone like me, or maybe use a good book like this, to work out what was it that was going on in your head. So you train your brain as you intend to compete. What does that actually mean? Forget the world outside and actually think, I'm training my mind on the track on every rep that I'm going to do. It's going to be bloody hard. It's really, really not going to be pleasant at times, but I want to tune in and actually work with the session and get through that session really well and feel really strong. And if you do that, then you're going to feel more confident. I'm here to go through rep by rep. That's how I'm going to do it. And then you can use tools such as, you'll hear people talk about using visualization, using self-talk. How are you going to see yourself running those reps? The amount of times when I'd be going to the track when I was going regularly, and you'd hear faster runners, slower runners going, oh, I hate these reps, oh, I hate it. Well, if you're going to track and going in with that mindset, you're probably not going to maximize that session. The long run as well, it's easy when it's 11, 12 miles. It's not going to take as long. And then when it sort of kicks up to 15, 16, 17, 18, and then you're in those zones where like this mile that I am going through is hell, you should be definitely in training having some long runs where it's like, that was a really hard long run. I don't know how I'm going to do 20 miles next week. And guess what? The amount of times I've spoken to people when they then have that experience doing a 17, 18, they dread the 20, but actually their body's recovered, they're fueling slightly different, they've had a better week, and that 20 takes care of itself. And I always advocate, as well as keeping a training diary, try and keep a little bit of a mental diary, a reflexive diary of like what each run was like. So you might go, track was hell on Tuesday. I couldn't cope with getting through each rep, but I kind of did it. Pat on the back. And then long run, I did some mental preparation. I was going out on my own. The weather was terrible. I wasn't looking forward to it, but I decided to stay strong and I executed my paces and well done, big pat on the back, tick. And then if you can start your training, mental training diary of how you're getting on and rewarding yourself bit by bit, by the time you get to race day, you stack together 60 pieces of evidence. That's how many runs you've done. And you can sit there the night before your marathon, and that we always hear people panicking, paranoia's coming in. If you sit there and you're looking through your mental diary, back in January, it was really cold, it was snowing, I had to go and do a treadmill run instead, but I got through it. You will get to that start line and you won't have 60 bits of information of confidence. It will be like a massive interest payment of 75. And then when I work with people and like we do this, people will say things like, I used to get so scared the night before a marathon, and now I follow this method. I go to the start line, I still get all the butterflies in the tummy, but I feel confident. The other point about that is that running on treadmills is so deathly dull. If you can go and do a long session on a treadmill, wherever your race is, and I know people who did like the Prague Marathon and they were running around an industrial estate for ages at the latter stages, they said that doing treadmill running wherever they were outside of the real world helps, because then you can look back and go, this isn't as bad as the treadmill. Often when you taper, your body sort of has a sort of shock reaction, and that's when it sort of allows colds and flu in. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. So again, anticipate that. Make sure you're getting your vitamin C, lots of liquids, water, eating sensibly. Again, this is another reason why maybe drinking can be something that is detrimental, because that'll disrupt your sleep. So if you've got a little sniffle, you want to maximize that sleep. One thing we haven't really touched on tonight, but is absolutely crucial, we've sort of alluded to it, is the recovery. You're going to put your body under load and strain, some of you that you've never done before. The recovery that you take, and your coach or coaches will advise, is as important as doing the actual running, because you're doing all of that stress to your body and mind, and you need the recovery physically and mentally to let yourself actually get the benefits. So some people kind of panic a bit because, I'm recovering, I'm not running today, I'm not doing any exercise, or I need to do well in the marathon, panic. Actually doing nothing and relaxing properly is as crucial as going and killing a track session or doing a long run.